Hello, I'm Scott Flowers with Cloud Ninjas, and today we're here to talk about Dell PowerEdge R910 server memory upgrades and how to properly configure the server. Well, thanks for stopping by today to learn a little bit more about the Dell PowerEdge R910 server. Please click the like button and smash that subscribe. Well, first things first, this is the next gen from the Dell PowerEdge R900, moving on from DDR2 memory to DDR3 memory. There are 4 CPU sockets inside using Intel Xeon 7500 series CPUs, and the CPU socket is an LGA 1567. There are 64 DIMM slots in total using DDR3 memory. You can use a couple of different sizes from low as 1 gig, doing 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig, 16 gig, and all the way up to 32 gig. No, you cannot use 64 gig. Unfortunately, 64 gig ECC Registered was never invented, so the highest you can use for this machine is 32 gig. There's a couple of speeds you can use. You can use 1066 or 1333, but realistically the 1333 is going to clock down to 1066. You can technically also put in 1600 as well, so you can do 1066, 1333, or 1600, but again, it's just going to clock down to 1066. So we normally recommend to our customers to just go ahead and buy the 1066 because it'll be a cheaper price point. The max that you can put into this machine is going to be 64 by 32 gigabytes, which gets you to a total of 2 terabytes of RAM, which is pretty awesome. And again, you can use that at 1600 megahertz for the max, but it's just going to clock down to 1066. All right, now that we know a little bit more about the machine, let's go ahead and open it up. I want to show you how to physically install it and configure it, show you a little bit about the memory risers themselves. But before we do, whenever you're working inside of any server, really should be wearing Esd Gear. So I'm going to grab my gear and I'll be right back. And we are back with our Esd Gear, so we're safe to open the machine and prevent it from electrostatic discharge. Before we open it up and get too much further in, I did want to actually go back and note that the R910 only accepts one type of memory. We kind of talked about it a little bit. It's ECC Registered, which is also known as an RDIMM. This machine does not accept load reduced memory. Unfortunately, this is part of the 11th gen. It doesn't. Dell doesn't accept load reduced memory until the 12th gen. So just wanted to put that out there for anyone that was thinking maybe I could put in some LRDIMMs. No, unfortunately, you cannot. And on that note, actually, you can't even put in unbuffered modules in this. It is a strictly ECC registered machine, and that is what you will want to put in here. So anyhow, now that we have our Esd Gear on, let's go ahead and open it up. You want to make sure the latch is set to unlock. Simply going to pop this open and lift the top up just like any other server you've ever worked on. I want to note a few things now that we are in here. First off, you can see this machine's a hoss, right? There are 8 memory risers. They're labeled down here A, B, all the way up to H. If you're going to be working on them, you want to start obviously on the A and then just work your way over. But this is also important depending on the CPUs that you have inside here. It'll actually matter for which risers you're actually going to work. But realistically, if you are using this machine, personally, I would recommend putting all 4 CPUs in and getting the most out of it, because this machine is built to do beast mode work where you're taking on really massive applications for a corporate environment or a large virtualization project. So really, you want to have all 4 CPUs, and it's kind of the point of this machine. So, but I wanted to note that just so you knew as far as how the risers worked. But and I'm gonna, since this is a memory video, we're gonna be showing you how to upgrade the RAM. But I did want to note, if you were here and you were trying to figure out how to actually get to the CPUs inside, you're gonna want to pop these latches open right here, and you'll notice these pop right up. You're going to want to pull this up, and you're going to remove all the memory risers. There's a little metal plate under that as well that you're going to need to remove, and then you'll have access to the CPUs. But since this is a memory video, we're going to be focused on the memory instead. So as far as getting into the memory, we're going to start with riser A. You're simply going to push the release button. You'll notice this pops up, and you're going to pull it right up. One thing I will note that is unfortunately a very flawed design with this machine. When you want to put this back in, you'll see there's these notches right here. You're actually putting the PCB in between those notches. Not something I would recommend, and Dell moves away from this in the 12th gen with the R920, but wanted to note that so that if you if you saw that, you knew exactly how to put it back in and what you were working with, and it's just unfortunately not the best design. So anyhow, now that we're in here, I want to show you a little bit about the riser and how to properly configure it. You're going to see two more releases right here, and you're going to pop this open kind of on a hinge. They do get stuck, so sometimes you have to kind of pull them a little bit hard, and like right now it's kind of stuck. So there we go, pops open. Once you get in, you will notice that there are 4 memory channels inside this riser, and each memory channel starts with the white DIMM slot. So one memory channel will be white and then black, and then it starts back over white and then black. This is really important. So if you were, let's say, only putting in 32 modules as opposed to all 64 modules, well, the best way to configure it is actually to use all the white slots and none of the black slots, okay? Using the white slots only will basically give you a better balance across your memory load, and it's really just about a performance standpoint. You don't want to just overload one channel. You want to get the most out of all of your channels. So that's the proper way to configure it if you were only putting in 32 modules. And that's the same too if you were doing, let's just say, 16 modules and you only had 2 CPUs, same deal, you're going to be using the white slots. The white is the start of the channel, and Dell's even labeled it over here, which makes it very easy for you, but that's important to note. That's how you would configure it. So I'm going to go ahead and load this one riser up, put it back in, and just show you kind of how to properly load it. We do have here some 32 gig 1333 ECC registered. One thing I'd like to note before we get too far in, there is a notch right here. This notch, also known as a key, is very important. This prevents users from putting in the wrong type of modules. So for instance, you couldn't put in DDR2 or DDR4, but it's also important because the notch is not perfectly centered, and there's actually a notch on the DIMM slots on the riser itself. So you need to make sure you line this up properly before you put it in. If you have it flipped around the wrong way, you can do one of 2 things. You could damage the leads themselves, or you could actually damage the slot, which means you might have to replace the whole riser, which at least in this case is just a riser, but on another machine that means you could actually have to replace the whole motherboard, which is very expensive and a huge waste of time. So something very simple just to make sure you line it up properly. So I'm going to go ahead and put this first one in. I want to note, once you've lined this up and you put it in, so you'll see it looks kind of like the module's in, right? It feels like it's in, but really it's not in. The tabs are still sticking out, and really what you want to hear is this click right here. You hear that click on both sides? Basically, that's how you know the module is fully inserted. Unfortunately, we hear it all too often from customers that they have an issue with a module, and really it's just not properly seated. So that's one of the first things we always tell people to check, is just make sure the module is properly seated. And each time I'm loading it, you'll hear that little click, that little click. Another thing that I'd like to note, really when I'm loading modules, one of the things I like to do is make sure all these tabs are open. Last thing you want to be doing is fumbling around with this while you're holding a module. It could lead to you holding it improperly, or you could drop it. Just simple things to try to make your life a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and finish loading this up and just show you how quick and easy this really is. And just like that, in a matter of a minute, really, you could knock out a whole riser really quickly. It's a very simple process, very easy to do. One of the things I also recommend is always just double check all your tabs are fully pushed in. Every once in a while you'll see one that's kind of sticking out, and that basically means it's not fully inserted. So just little things to double check before you put it in, or before you finalize everything. So I'm going to go ahead, close the top. You're going to hear it's going to have a little click, and sometimes it's a little difficult to push it back down. But okay. And then when we put this back, one of the things that I always like to note is just be careful with these PCBs when you're putting them back in. They line up right here. It's not the best design, but it's just important to note this is how you line everything back up properly. So I'm going to get it all set up. And I'm always super careful just because I just don't want to damage the PCB here. And I'm just not a big fan of this design as a whole, to be honest. Okay, so we got it lined up. Now we're going to set it down. And once you get it in, you'll see you'll have to push this kind of hard. See, I'm pushing it, but you have to push it decently hard to get it fully in. And now it's inserted. It's completely in. So Now we're going to actually do this off camera in a minute, but we're going to fill the rest of these up for our customer. Really, if you're at home and you're wondering how long this is going to take, it's really not that bad. I feel like in 20 minutes you could pull out all the risers, load them up, take out the CPUs, install 4 CPUs. I mean, really, you could build this out pretty quickly. So it can look a little bit intimidating, but it's really not that hard, especially when you have guides online like this that make it easier to do. So anyhow, we're going to go ahead and close it up. Wanted to say thank you guys for stopping by. If you're looking to upgrade your PowerEdge R910, then do us a favor and reach out to sales@cloudninjas.com. We'd love to quote you. We got a ton of product in stock specifically for this machine. So just give us a ring, and thanks again for stopping by, and don't forget to smash that subscribe.